Welcome back to another episode of the Student Athlete Sessions. Today, we are joined by a guest on the West Coast, a native of Oregon who is back in the state serving his alma mater in the role of AD with a number of interesting stops along the way after he concluded his baseball career at the school that he later came back to get his degree from. This is Linfield out in Oregon. We are joined by Scott Brosius, again, the Linfield AD. Scott, thanks for joining the program.
No, absolutely. Great to be on chatting with you.
Yeah, I think, we always like to start just walk us through what is going on for you right now in your life as Linfield AD.
Yeah, we've hit summertime. Linfield graduates a little bit on the later side than some of the other schools around us. So with a late May graduation, June for us is that kind of the end of the fiscal year. So we're finalizing budgets, doing all that kind of fun stuff. And then for us, we're kind of looking forward to at the end of July, we have kind of our big fundraiser, golf tournament, dinner, Wildcat Open, we call it, comes up in the summer, and then yeah, blink of an eye, it's mid-August, and football and the other fall sports are back on campus, and off we go again.
Yeah, I know it's sometimes a point of pride in an athletic department, but who is the best golfer in the Linfield athletic department?
That's a great question. I got to go with Chase, our sports information director, college golfer. I've never played with him, but just knowing his background, I guarantee it's a little bit straighter than the rest of us. It's funny when I was done playing. When I was still playing baseball, I was back in the off season and playing golf, and I had a tendency, like a lot, to could hit it a ways, but they didn't always go straight. And I remember teeing off the first tee at this course and hit one right into the trees. And this old timer kind of walks over and goes, "In this sport, you got to play your foul balls," and kind of walked away. And so over the years, I played a lot of foul balls out there.
I like it. All right, well, try to get Chase in your group then for the charity tournament.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, I think today gonna definitely try to touch all parts of your career and circle back to where you are as the AD in your current role. But I do want to just part of this is to talk about your recruiting journey. We love to have former college athletes on to share their process and how they arrived at the school they did. You have clearly loved Linfield. You met your wife there. Multiple of
Yeah.
your kids went there. I think there was one rogue that decided not to go.
Right. No, exactly. Yeah, Linfield runs really deep for me, and it's really interesting. I think like a lot when you go into the recruiting process coming out of high school, I had my eyes set on all the big schools. I was a good student, took classes seriously, and so Stanford was my kind of my dream scenario, being able to go. My mom was living down in the Bay Area, and I thought, man, if there's ever a way to get to Stanford, that would be the place. But Oregon State, Portland State at the time, all the Division I schools were kind of my dream scenario. But coming out of high school, I was 6 foot, weighed 165 pounds, and was shaven only to say that I could shave. And so physically, I was behind some others, and so didn't really have those schools beating down my doors. Became a parent at Stanford, for example. It was going to be a walk-on opportunity if I could get into the school, and so anyway, a lot of those just kind of dead ends that essentially led me to Linfield. At the time an NAI school that did have some scholarship money, was able to come here and get some help with the college and just be at a place that I knew I was wanted and was going to get the opportunity. And so, I look back now and I'm so glad that some of the opportunities didn't pan out because Linfield just ended up being the perfect place for me.
Yeah. And the coach that recruited you, Scott, was it Scott Carnahan at the time?
Yeah, Scott Carnahan, and yeah, kind of my senior year, had a good senior year in high school, talking to Carney quite a bit. So obviously knew Linfield was in the conversation, but again, you're still hoping for, that school to come in and kind of swoop you up. And kind of my last opportunity back then was it's called the state metro game. It was our state playoff game, and so I went there as it was kind of an all-star series. We played a series of 3 games and went there as both a pitcher and a position player, and so got to do both. So as a hitter, I was 0 for 3 with 2 strikeouts, and the one time I made contact, I hit him in a double play. And pitching wise, I didn't even last an inning. Left the game with the bases loaded, 2 outs, and a couple runs in. And so, needless to say, it was not the opportunity that got me jumped over. And you laughed about it with Scott Carnan later because he was just like he goes, I was just smiling the whole time because I knew it helped my chances to get you here at Linfield.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I would say this is something I've heard from a lot of coaches that, when they're evaluating you at a tournament or a camp or something, oftentimes they want to see you in not at your best, right?
Yeah.
Like facing adversity. Is that something you ever saw when you were, we'll get this later, but coaching baseball at Linfield yourself?
Absolutely. That's a great point. I mean, as I was recruiting, I absolutely wanted to see guys have a bad game. I knew, by the time you're recruiting somebody, they have the talent, the ability to play there. So you kind of want to see them in all situations. I want to see how they handle success, but I also want to see how they handle the failure and how they carry themselves and how they respond. So yeah, I think that's absolutely a piece that you want to see.
Yeah. Yeah. And for Scott, it worked out. He was able to get you to Linfield. Um, yeah. What was it like playing under him? You ended up playing for 3 years at Linfield,
Mhm.
um, before getting drafted. But what was that like? Your playing career, both on and off the field, kind of his influence.
Yeah, I think two things. Carney's influence was huge in my life. I mean, we've stayed close, obviously. We'll probably talk about that, but our relationship over the years has just had so many different forms. But, he was that coach that invested in you personally. It wasn't just about the baseball and what you did on the field, but off the field. Just very, like I said, just very invested in seeing all of his players have success. Great teacher of the game. Both he just pitched. He was a great pitching coach, but also hitting wise, really understood hitting. So really good teacher of the game. And I remember my freshman year sitting down with him and again coming here as just this skinny kid, this skinny freshman, and he said, let's talk about your goals. What are your short-term goals and what are your long-term goals here in the program? And one of my long-term goals I talked about is that I wanted to have the opportunity to play professional baseball. And he didn't laugh at me. He didn't give me the odds against this or anything like that. He just said, listen, I'll work as hard for you as you're willing to work for yourself and for the program. And we'll see if we can make this happen. And so that's kind of who he was. He was the guy that was reaching out to scouts as my years progressed and my development and was just a huge part of that as well.
Mm, yeah. There's something so powerful about just sharing your goals, vision, whatever it is, with the people around you. And I think, whether you're a recruit listening to this or a current college athlete, whatever it is that you want to do, share it with people. Don't hide it yourself because, as your example, Scott, illustrates, you know, you weren't going to be able to call those scouts on your own, and
Right.
maybe get the look that got you onto a major league draft board. But yeah, I think that, is a really powerful thing. And so even more powerful when it's the coach asking you for that.
Yeah, no, I think it's important in terms of goals that we have to make them tangible. Anybody, whether it's personal goals or team goals. When I took over as head coach here at Linfield, the spring before I took over, I was the assistant head coach for a couple years before. So the spring before I officially took over, our softball team, which we've have pretty good softball team here at Linfield, but softball team that year had won the national championship. And so as they came back on the campus, they had a celebration at the softball field, and I had the entire baseball team go to that celebration. And I did it for two reasons. The first reason was, well, anytime a Linfield team wins a national championship, we should all be there, a part of that to celebrate it. But secondly, I wanted them, and my message to them was, listen, you go to school with them, you go to class with them, you're around them. They just did something that you guys are capable of doing. And I want you guys to know that this is like real. This is something, because anybody can just sort of say, I want to win a championship.
Yeah.
But do you really believe it's possible? And then if you believe it's possible, are you willing to take the steps to go out there and make that happen? And so I wanted them to see that this is something tangible. This is something that we can reach, that we can achieve, if we're willing to make the commitment to do it. And so I think making our goals, as you said, speaking them, making them tangible, make them something now that you can actually even be accountable towards. Like, if my goal is to do this, okay, what steps are you going to take? And can we help you be accountable to take those steps?
Right. Yeah. I think that is awesome. And yeah, foster a culture of winning in wherever you are. Like, yeah, I think the example of, I've seen it at my alma mater. My coach who came in during my sophomore year inherited a losing program with not great tradition of winning. I mean, I don't think they'd had a winning season in 25 years. And I know he went out and talked to other coaches in the athletic department who were winning, right? Soccer was doing well, softball, baseball, and trading notes and making sure it's an open door to, have conversations and figure out where everyone can improve, not just trying to gatekeep
Yeah,
or preserve your own success at maybe the detriment of other teams on campus. So
right,
it's really
right.
awesome. Um, yeah. Throughout your career, when did it become apparent to you that getting drafted and playing pro would actually be real? Like, it's great to have a goal, it's great to work towards it, but then
Mhm.
when was the first time you were like, this is going to happen? And what did that
Yeah.
look like?
Yeah, I think as my sophomore year in college, I'd made a big jump. It was typical kind of a freshman year as a part-time player. Got off to a slow start, but my sophomore year kind of I had a good year. I think so. I started to feel like, yes, this is something that's going to drive me forward. But really by my junior year, sophomore summer, junior year, I was having scouts, starting to make contact. And so at that point, once you're hearing from professional scouts, then you start to say, okay, yeah, now I think I see an inline, if you want to call it that, or see that possibility starting to happen.
Mm. Right. And you end up getting drafted in the 20th round by the Oakland Athletics. So Stanford didn't work out, but you made your way down to the Bay Area anyways.
I did, yeah, and so it's funny. The truth is, I think, I look back and the draft. I didn't really know how to handle the draft. Back then you didn't have agents and what players do now, and so you were just kind of on your own talking to scouts. And one of the questions they had for me, coming out of Linfield, good academic school and all that, is, if we draft you, will you sign, or are you looking to finish your degree, or will you sign? And I didn't really know how to answer that because, until it happened, I'm like, well, man, until it happens, it's hard to know that. But, I kind of knew deep down that if I got the opportunity, it's what I wanted to do my entire life. And if I got the opportunity, got drafted, then I was going to do it. And I probably should have just said that, because I think I probably created a little bit of doubt. They called me during the draft, in the 11th round, and said, hey, we're ready to take you, but we need to know you're signable. And I probably didn't give them the answer they needed to hear. So next thing I knew, I heard from him, it was the 20th round. But again, got the opportunity, and once it happened, it was, yeah, again, kind of a no-brainer. I wanted to go pursue and start my professional career.
Yeah. And there have been recent changes, I think, this month to the rules on drafting players or maybe they're just proposed at the moment. Is that, have you heard of this?
Yeah, I think that's going to be some of the new negotiations. I know they're talking about changing the draft, and they already have made some changes, right? Like when I was drafted, they had up to 50 rounds. I mean, it would go on, and now they've cut that back, I think, to 20 rounds. I know they're having conversations about whether high school players should be eligible
Right.
for the draft or not. That one hasn't happened yet. I think that's going to be part of of the new, negotiations, things like that. But the draft has changed a ton, and as you'd expected. I mean, I was drafted in '87. That's a while ago. Lee Tinsley was our first round pick that year. Played in the big leagues for quite a while, and he got, I think, about $110,000 signing bonus as a first rounder.
Wow.
And so you look at what's out there today, and you realize things have changed quite a bit in the draft.
Right. The financial incentive to sign instead of finishing your degree are much higher.
Right, right.
Yeah. How about finding your feet as a pro? I mean, as you mentioned, you're kind of on your own. You don't have an agent. You did have your mom in the Bay Area, which helps to have some family close by. But what were some of those first years like in the majors, and what maybe skills that benefited you at Linfield translated to the majors?
Yeah, I think, part of what helped me is again being kind of, I guess, a late maturity type of a player. I think I felt like I always had to kind of fight for it and scrap a little bit. I was never physically, dominating or that much bigger or stronger than everybody else. And so, I think at Linfield, I think two things for me, as I look back, I was so glad I was not drafted out of high school because I would have been very tempted to sign. I would have, that's what I wanted to do. But I matured so much at Linfield, and not just physically. I mean, certainly on the field, I got stronger, put on about 20 pounds while I was at Linfield, 25 pounds. But more importantly, just emotionally matured as well. Like I found myself, being away from home on a campus, living on your own. And even though it's college and it's not real life quite yet, but still, it's that step towards preparing yourself for really, or what are a lot of ups and downs in baseball. I think, for me in baseball, like a lot of different things, but certainly in baseball, it's a game kind of based on failure. As a hitter, the best hitters fail 7 out of 10 times, right?
Right.
And so how do you deal with the ups and the downs? And I think some of that is I certainly learned that at Linfield, just in whether it's your studies and feeling the heat of finals coming up, or on the field you're fighting for playing time, things like that. I think I just matured so much that I was just in so much of a better place. I look back, and if I had signed as an 18-year-old, it would have been a really tough thing for me. But having those years in college, I think were really huge for me, just to be ready for what that lifestyle was.
Hmm.
Getting to the big leagues, like I said, the minor leagues is what it is, and you're kind of fighting your way through. But then once you get to the big leagues, and I came up. When I first came up, it wasn't as an everyday player. The A's in '91, when I came up with them, they were a very veteran team. They were pretty set. Had been to the World Series 3 years in a row, and so fighting again for playing time and trying to understand what my role is. The first couple of years moving up and down from the big leagues to AAA, it was a grind, and it was hard. So it's you kind of, your brain tells your whole life, this is where I want to get to, and I want to get to the big leagues. And then once you get there, you're like, okay, now what? And so obviously the goal is to stay, and the goal is to try to establish yourself as a big league player, and be able to stay up there.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm sure it is tough. Like, yeah, to get drafted, you must, in your brain, you're like, I've made it. Right. And then the
Right.
reality is, no, you go out for assignment, you're playing,
Yeah.
in a totally different city from where you got drafted from. And yeah, and it's just now it's trying to stay and make inroads in that rotation, which
Yeah.
you eventually did. You were playing third, and if I'm not mistaken, for Oakland and hitting well. But I do want to talk about, as you mentioned, baseball is a game of failure.
Hmm.
And, you know, I think a lot of people who maybe don't know Linfield, know you for your time on the Yankees and helping to
Hmm.
win World Series. But this period from 1996 to 1997 is what I want to ask you about, because you go from having potentially your worst season statistically on
Hmm.
the field in 96 to 97, getting traded to the Yankees, hitting 300, 19 home runs, almost 100 RBIs, and you're an all-star. Mentally, what was happening for you that season, and how did you turn around a really poor outing, a really poor year into maybe one of the best years of your career?
Yeah, no, I think it's a great question. I think, as I kind of track my time in Oakland, again, coming up as a part-time player and each year kind of, earning more and more, playing time to finally, like in 1996, was named a third baseman and got to play and be an everyday player and had a really good year in 96. And then in 97, it all went the opposite way.
Yep.
Went from kind of my best year of my career to my worst year of my career. And there's a lot of things that came into that, and it was dealt with some injuries. I'd had kind of a knee issue all year that I was dealing with. That ultimately in August had to have a surgery done. Probably rushed back from that surgery. I was playing again about 3 weeks after the surgery just because I was trying to salvage this year and was not probably not the right thing to do, was probably not ready when I came back. So I was dealing with some injury, but also just trying to deal with the struggles of it too. And I didn't handle it well. I think I beat myself up a lot. I think, I would stay after a game and be up in the cages for 2 hours, just, hitting until midnight and just really, kind of sometimes the harder I try, the worser it gets kind of thing. And,
Yeah.
and, and so I think I got into that mentality where I was trying so hard to get out of it that I was just beating myself up physically and mentally. And so, when that season ended, it's definitely kind of one of those years that little soul searching. You got to come home in the off season, and no question, I'm asking those questions like, what happened? Like, what went wrong? And so as I kind of peeled those layers back, I think it was just about trusting myself as a player, trusting where I'm at, and I kind of lost a little bit of that trust during that season, and so kind of made a commitment also. Like I said, it was a miserable year, as you can imagine.
Yeah.
And kind of made a commitment also too that, like, listen, you're in the big leagues and you're doing what you've wanted to do your entire career. You've got to allow yourself to enjoy this through the ups and the downs. You've just got to allow yourself to enjoy the experience and not ever allow yourself to go through that type of a year mentally again, where you just spend the whole time beating yourself up. And so yeah, after 97, you start asking those questions like, am I going to have a big league job? It was a tough year. So not only do I end up with a job, but I get traded from a last place team to a first place team. And so going to the Yankees for me was just a shot of adrenaline, honestly, to my career. It was new, and it was probably a great after the season I had. I think it was great to have a fresh start and kind of just redefine yourself a little bit, but also to go from an environment, at Oakland, 8,000 people, at a game, and a team that at that point was just a rebuild team and not really winning, to 50,000, 40,000 in Yankee Stadium and a chance to be in the playoffs. And so it was just, for me, like I said, it was just a shot of adrenaline that just kind of reignited, my career over there.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think it's important for, I mean, so many things in what you just said. One, giving yourself time to come back from an injury, grace when things don't go right on the field, because
Yeah.
I know there are, I went through it myself. As an athlete, whether you're playing Division III in college or you're playing professionally, when things aren't going well, when you're not performing to the standard you expect,
Yeah.
it feels like everything is going wrong. And
Yeah.
I think that mindset to just take a step back and remember where you are, and remember that you are to some extent accomplishing this thing that you set out to do, and I think, yeah, trying to not get too low, but also and just keep perspective about where you are. So
You just said the word I was thinking of, right? Is some of the perspective of where we're at, what we're doing, and really, I think, and that's part of the journey too. Is is you look at guys playing at the highest level, and it doesn't have to be sports. This can be in our career, regardless of what we're doing after we're done playing. But we need to kind of stay off that roller coaster of the highs and the lows, and kind of keep more of a steady kind of pace. Yes, we're going to have good days, and we don't need to get too overly excited about the good days because there's going to be some bad days as well, and we don't need to get too, frustrated down about that. And so kind of learning to kind of just stay off the roller coaster. Mark McGuire, when I was playing there, he made this comment, and it certainly applies to baseball, but I think it applies to the rest of our lives too. But he said, "You're never as good as you think you are, and you're never as bad as you think you are. You're always one swing away from turning it around." Right.
Right.
And so when you're struggling, all of a sudden it can just click. You make one little tiny, and usually they're just tiny changes. They're not big things, but just something tiny that clicks. And so, but when we're struggling, it feels so huge, and it feels like I don't feel like I've ever hit before in my life, and it's usually just a tiny little thing. And so if we can sort of, kind of stay the course, trust, our process, what we're doing, I think it helps us to kind of get through that some of those times.
Right. Continue to take swings. Don't try to tear everything down or step away completely. I think
Right.
yeah,
Right.
I like that. Don't ever, yeah. You're not as good as you think you are, and you're not as bad as you think you are. So
Yeah.
um yeah. With the Yankees, anything that I mean, you said you played with Mark McGuire in Oakland. Obviously, you played with some great Yankees
Mhm.
on your run of three World Series wins in a row. Um, any other mindset things that you adopted from that team or teammates during that period?
One thing I would say, there's two things that come to mind. One is kind of an on the field thing, and another is kind of an off the field thing. But on the field, when I came over to New York, it was such a cool clubhouse. Again, you're coming to a new clubhouse. You've maybe talked to guys on the field, but you didn't really know them. So you're trying to see, who these guys are and what it's all about. And I walked into that clubhouse. And it was so apparent from day one that what we did as a team was so much more important than what guys were trying to do individually. All they talked about, every guy, whether it's Tino Martinez, Paul O'Neill, Derek Jeter, you just go down the list, Bernie Williams, all these guys, all they talked about was we're going to the World Series. We're getting back to the World Series. It was all about team and having success there. And I think there's something there that's something that's so important for us to understand that if we will commit to the team, if we commit to make the team better, we'll make ourselves better. It's not necessarily the other way around. Right? I mean, it's so easy just to focus on what we're doing, but if we just try to be a good teammate, if we just try to do something to help that team win, ultimately we're going to do something good, and that's going to benefit us, individually as well. So this team had such a drive, like every single game mattered. Like it's cliche, but it really was. The game we're playing today is the most important game of the season. Because it's so easy to look, and especially in baseball, professionally, you're playing 162 games, and it's easy to kind of just like kind of glide through a part of the season. But this team was really focused on let's win today. Like today's game matters. Win or lose, then today. Now we look at tomorrow, and tomorrow's game matters. And so as a team, we didn't really ride those waves either because if we won, we should have won. Okay, so we're not celebrating that. Like, yeah, you feel good about it. We should have won. Okay, now next game. And if we lost, okay, put that one away. Let's go win the next game. And so very focused team like that. But one of the commitments that I made personally when I came to New York was I was in, and again, this will show my age because they're not out there much anymore. But I'm like, I'm not going to read the newspapers. I'm going to stay away from what I called all the noise. We knew New York was a media heavy place, and so I'm like, I didn't want to know. I just said I just want to focus on what I'm doing. I don't want to know what reporters are writing about me, good or bad. I don't want to see it for two reasons. Like I just don't want to get caught up in that emotionally, but I also just want to be professional with all the reporters and not look at a guy and say, "Oh, you wrote this negative thing." And so I just didn't want any of that. I wanted to kind of just quiet the noise. And I think in today's world, we have a lot of noise around us, whether it's social media, whether you just name it. I think there's so much more noise out there that I think that's so important that if we can just quiet all the noise, we're not comparing ourselves to anybody else. We're not going to, all those things just to focus on what we need to do to be, successful and how do I be a good teammate and how do I help my team win. I think it really simplifies, what we're doing. And so for me, that was a huge step to take. And part of what I learned, in Oakland is you can imagine having a year like I did my last year in Oakland, a lot of negative, reporting and things like that. And I found myself reading it and it was frustrating me. And I felt bad for my teammate, all those things. And I just decided, no, I'm just going to stay away from it. And so I can honestly say for my 4 years in New York, I didn't read the papers. I stayed away from it. I stayed away from the noise and just tried to focus on doing my job.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think it's a great point. You see pro athletes nowadays deleting apps from their phone during the playoffs and going dark on social media and all this stuff. And I think, you know, it does help to, as you mentioned, not accelerate those highs and then also not accelerate those lows. Like, because I think when you get in that echo chamber of, oh, he's hitting so poorly or he can't field or whatever it is, then yeah, it has a tendency to kind of coalesce and make maybe a minor thing feel pretty major in the moment.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I
So
think ultimately we got to just decide whose voices are important to us and whose voices do we want to hear. Is it those that we trust, those that, around us that we love, or are we going to let all this chatter from people we've never met, will never will meet, or are we going to allow that chatter to impact how we think? And so, yeah, ultimately we just got to decide on whose voices we want to listen to.
yeah, it's a good point. A friend sent me an article this morning of this on while we're on the topic of the New York media, a major radio host in New York criticizing Carl Anthony Towns, saying he was a loser and would never win a championship. And that was last year, and of course this year he wins a championship. So
Right,
it just
exactly.
goes to show that you really have to do what you are going to do and tune out the rest.
Yeah, exactly
So
right.
yeah. Um, Real quick before we get to your Linfield, returning to Linfield, you were a manager for a long time. You ended up coaching in the majors. Joe Torre was your manager in New York.
Mhm.
What did you learn from him? I mean, legendary baseball manager. What were some things that maybe you took from the coaching ranks back to Linfield?
Yeah, I took a lot of things from Joe, and I think we all become kind of a product of our experiences, who we played for, So I look back at really kind of basically three managers that I played for, in the major leagues. Tony La Russa, was the manager, when I came up with Oakland. Then Art Howe was there for my last couple of years, and then on to Joe Torre. And I think you take pieces from everybody. Where La Russa, very analytical, very prepared, very intense. And so parts of that, I think you grab like in terms of preparation. Art Howe was much more of kind of a player's, manager in terms of a little bit more low key. But then Joe, I think Joe in New York was one of the reasons he was so terrific was the baseball knowledge, all that was there, obviously. Great player. You make the case, and I would make the case, a Hall of Famer as a player, not just as a player slash manager. Great playing career. So he'd been there, he understands it. But how Joe treated us as individuals, I think, is what set him apart. Is he had a perspective. We talked about that earlier, in New York. He had a perspective that, yes, this is important what we do, but you have families, you have life, things like that. And so he was a great buffer. Between the New York, the media sometimes, George Steinbrenner at times, all that. He was just sort of that buffer there a little bit, but he just had the ability to kind of say the right thing at the right time to guys. He would challenge you, kind of when you needed it, but then he'd also just kind of come up like after a bad game and he would just make a comment like, yeah, I remember this game that I whatever went 0 for 4 with hit into three double plays or whatever, right? And he's just sort of just letting you know that I've been there. Like the game's hard. Like I get it. I've been there, and you're okay. Like my we were my first year, we were one of the guys that in my hitting group, Chad Curtis, we were kind of I was really swinging the bat well. Chad was struggling at that point a little bit, and so he walked over to us as we're doing our pregame routine, and he looks at me and he goes, "Listen, remember, you're not a home run hitter. You're a line drive hitter and home runs happen." So he's just kind of saying, listen, you know what I mean? Don't try to be more. You're going good. Don't try to be more than you are. And he looked over at Chad, and Chad was the one that was struggling. And he goes, you just keep doing what you're doing. You're fine. And that's all he said. And he walked away. And Chad was like, that was awesome. Like, you know what I mean? Instead of like, hey, listen, he's like, you're good. Like, you're fine. And so he had that way of just, talking to guys and knowing the right thing to say.
Right. And I would imagine that when you're a hitter, much like, I hear in golf, you want to have as few swing thoughts as possible. Having
Yeah.
a bunch of chatter up here is not going to help. So I would imagine, yeah, just
Not,
getting keep it going is
yeah.
probably the best medicine in that
Yeah.
situation.
Yeah, we used to laugh, and there was a commercial when I was a kid, and it talked about the mind is a terrible thing to waste, and talk about education and things like that. And in New York, we kind of cut that down and just said the mind is a terrible thing, period. Because, like I said, you can get in your own way sometimes. And so, I literally had it on my glove. I had KISS on my glove. Keep it simple, stupid. Like,
Yeah.
the ball's hit you. What's your job? Catch it. Then what? Just throw it. All the other stuff doesn't really matter. Ultimately, that's your job. And so, yes, as a hitter, pitcher, whatever, what are the one or two or three simple thoughts that allow you to do what you want to do, on the field?
Yeah. Yeah. And to close out this chapter of your pro career, you have this dream at Linfield. You want to play professionally, and you retire in 2001 as both an all-star World Series MVP. You've caught the last pitch of a perfect game. You've hit the bottom of the ninth home run in the World Series.
Yeah.
Uh, like I think in terms of a dream career from where you were, you've kind of done everything. And I love that you go back after this moment and you announce your retirement at Linfield and you go and complete your degree almost immediately. Why was that a priority after achieving all these amazing professional accomplishments? Why was it that you wanted to go back?
Well, I think two things. I felt like getting my degree was important. It was something that with my parents, they, growing up and as I talked about nothing but playing baseball as a kid, they're like, great, but just have something to fall back on. Go do this, take it as far as you can, but take your school serious, have you get your degree and things like that. So that was something that I had said I would do that if I signed after my junior year like I did, that would finish up. But it was also really important for me, I think, to show my kids the importance of education as well. That even though I didn't technically need to go back to do it, I felt it was important enough, and I wanted them to see that we felt it was important enough that I graduated, that my wife Jennifer graduated, that we thought education was important. So those were really the primary reasons. I'd actually started taking classes my last year or two as I was playing, just taking a class or two at a time. I had time on road trips anyway, and so I was starting down that road, and then yeah, came back and was able to finish it up not too long after that.
Yeah. And then you take over as head baseball coach in 2007. What was that intermediate period like for you? I guess maybe readjusting just to life out of the league. What did you get up to?
Yeah, I think it was, when I came back was first done playing. It was really it was a family decision for me. It was, as you mentioned, I got to do some really cool things professionally, but there was nothing else to chase. I wasn't getting to the Hall of Fame. I didn't need to try to stick around to get to 3,000 hits or something like that. We just been the four straight World Series, had a chance to do all these things. my kids were getting older. We were spending more time apart just due to their lives and not having to pull them from everything. And so we just felt like it was time for me to be home. And so early on, just really kind of threw myself into their lives. Was coaching multiple little league teams and girls basketball at the junior high. So I had a chance to coach all my kids. And then just gradually took on more and more over at Linfield. I was helping out my first year or so, was helping out at the high school and over at Linfield, just jumping in, helping hitters, things like that, but was really drawn back to Linfield and just the college athlete. I just really enjoyed the focus and the motivation and everything that comes with a college athlete. And so just every year it was kind of a took on more and more of a role until finally went to Scott Carnahan and I said, hey, listen, I think this is I want to go find I want to go find a head coaching job. Can you write me a recommendation kind of thing, right? Just whatever. He goes, well, let's talk about Linfield. And I'm like, I don't want your job. I just want a job. And he goes, no, because he was the athletic director at that time. And he goes, I think it's time for me to kind of step away from the head job and why don't you would you consider taking this job? I said, well, of course, I would love this job. And so with Scott, with Carney and I, it's just been this very interesting kind of full circle that, he was the head coach. I played for him, came back and coached for him. Then when I took over as the head coach, he stayed on as my pitching coach and
Right.
was also the athletic director at that time, right? And so my oldest daughter, she goes, this is interesting, Dad. She goes, you and Carney are gonna have to get along because technically you can fire him and then he could fire you.
That's
So,
right.
so anyway, it's just been a really cool, for me, like McMinnville was always our off-season home. Even when I was playing professionally, we always came back. This has always been home. So very natural transition to end up back on the campus again.
Yeah, and beautiful place. I had the opportunity to come up and check it out not too long ago. I actually got a tour from a current softball player. We were talking about Linfield softball earlier, so
Yeah.
got to see all the facilities and yeah, just hear about what makes it such a special place. And I would say one thing that stood out to me about the community was, people like yourself, former Linfield athletes who have not only stayed local but have come back to be coaches of the teams that they used to play on. Um, Saw that in multiple situations, or even people who had been D3 athletes at other schools
Yeah.
came back to Linfield. I just feel like it can be strong at some schools, but it really stood out there, and I think it just speaks volumes to the experience they had as students and wanting to, as you did, come back to campus and give back and share your personal and professional experiences with the next generation.
Yeah, it is. It's very hard. It's hard. It feels easy to explain, but it's kind of hard to explain. Like just the amount of pride, as a former athlete here, and how so many of our athletes stay connected to Linfield, and not just athletes, but just Linfield in general. There's this campus is, it's I know it's similar, obviously, to a lot of Division III smaller private institutions, but there's something different about this place that students and athletes have experiences here. Their coaches, their profs, everybody's invested so much, into their lives that they feel like they belong and they're a part of a community. And it's something that we talk about that in a sense, it's like a fraternity. When you graduate, you never really leave. You're always a part of the Wildcats. And so, yeah, you see, Joe Smith, who's been such a successful football coach here, our current coach, but all of our football coaches have been Linfield lineage, and with baseball with Jordan Harlow back there, it's been kind of the case that a lot in a lot of our sports, graduates come back.
Yeah. Yeah. I think again, it speaks volumes to the quality of experience they had and that they want to be there again. And
Yeah.
um, yeah. So yeah, I think you know, I don't want to glaze over your time as a uh baseball coach, but you brought a winning culture to the team. I mean, Scott had already, it had been a great program before, but you
Mm.
went 270 and 96 as a coach, won a national title. What do you look back on that time as? you went on to coach again in the majors, but what do you look back on your time as the baseball coach at Linfield and remember?
Yeah, for me, like I said, it was another one of those full circles. The pride of being able to to coach this team that I had played for. Love that. Yes, no question about it. I did not take over a struggling program. I took over a very very good program, a team that has won lots of conference championships, things like that. So it certainly wasn't a rebuild. But I think being able to kind of take that next step with the team and get it to the national scene, I think that part was very fulfilling, for the school. But for me personally, I think watching our players achieve and have that success was maybe more fulfilling than even being a player. As a player, when you're dogpiling at the end of the year, it's just pure joy. Like you're just a little kid again, and you're just jumping on the pile, and it's great. But as a coach and watching your players dogpile and watching your players have their moment, it's just really fulfilling and very satisfying. And what it meant for just not just those players, but the number of alumni that called and talked and came on campus and all that kind of stuff. That part felt really good, that it was a part of something just bigger, certainly bigger than myself, bigger than our team, but something that like I said, everybody that had played at Linfield could come back and kind of draw on.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that is a special moment. I definitely I know that as an alumni, I have felt more nervous watching games, and more excited than I ever did as a player. I think
Yeah.
it is, it's something different to be a fan, and I'm assuming to be a coach as well. Um, yeah, still invested in the program, but in a very different way.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, and you're right. You talk about the control of it. Like when you're playing, you feel like you have some control, like you're out there playing. But when I started coaching, that's the first thing I realized, like, wow, like this is out of my hands. And all we can do is prepare. And at this point, they're the ones pitching and taking the at bats. And so
right,
you don't have a lot of control out there. And but certainly as a fan, you're just yeah, I find myself obviously, being back, for example, this, just last month at the softball, national championship series. Yeah, it's you're much more nervous for me as an athletic director watching than even as I was as a coach.
right, right. Yeah, I think just to close it out here, I want to touch on your new role, or not so new, but a couple years in as AD at Linfield, and
Yeah.
where you want to take the program and what people should know about the Wildcats that maybe aren't from Oregon or the West Coast and aren't as familiar with the school.
Yeah, for me, I think the reason I'm back in this role are all the reasons that we've talked about here. That I love this place, I love what this campus is about, I love what we are as an institution. But yeah, my interest obviously is we. Athletics is a big part of what we do here at Linfield. Nearly half of our undergraduate students on the McMinnville campus are athletes, so it's a big part of the footprint. I do believe that athletics is a classroom outside the classroom. All those things that we talked about. You're going to learn skills, and you're going to learn accountability and learning to deal with failure and being a teammate, and all these things that are really going to help us, I think, beyond the sport that we play. And so, but I also believe that if you're going to offer anything, whether it's athletics or whatever we're going to offer, if you're going to offer it, let's do it with excellence, and let's be the very best that we can be at it. There's for me, I just can't live with, like, oh, we're just going to just roll out the balls and tell everybody have a good time. Like, no, if we're going to do this, if we're going to commit to something, let's see how good we can become. And so that's sort of, I guess, as I look at the athletic director role, is how good can we become as an athletic department? How good can we become as coaches? Certainly as our teams, as we go out and compete. Let's do it with excellence. Let's do it the right way. And so, we're the thing, some of the things that we're taking on right now are really trying to, as we support our student athletes, how do we support them holistically, not just on the field or the court or where they're playing, in competition, but off the field, how can we support them with, strength and conditioning, nutrition, mental skills and mental health support, all these are the type of things that we're trying to drive. So our student athletes, when they come here, they're like, as I felt for, well cared for, but they're well cared for in all those areas. So those are the things right now that we're looking to do. Um, just like I said, how can we help all of our athletes have success and help them in all areas of their life?
Yeah. I mean, I think very comprehensive approach, and you've lived it, and you maybe can take the things that you wish you would have had as you during your own college career and then pro career, and bring that all back, and that yeah, bring that mindset to the next generation, which I'm sure they'll appreciate. Um, so yeah, I want to, for the last question, let you be a little retrospective here. We asked this to everyone, but what would you, if you could go back and have a conversation with 17 or 18-year-old Scott,
Hmm.
uh, on the verge of going to college, what advice would you give him?
And I guess I'll kind of keep my answer more to athletics. I guess we're talking baseball and things like that. And I kind of used the word earlier, probably what I learned a little bit as I played. But even as I'm done and I look back, I think at times I would just tell myself to trust myself more. Like you put in the work, you're putting in the time, you're doing all that. Now just go out and trust your ability and trust that. I was kind of as I look back, I was that tinkerer. Like, okay, how can I make my swing better? And how can I do that? And sometimes you work yourself in and out of good situations. And I think if I could tell myself, just go back, you do the work, and I felt like I did. I felt like as I played and all that, I had no regrets. Put everything out there. Now just go out there and trust what you do and don't stress so much about it.
Yeah. Great message. Again, I think there are a lot of tinkerers out there who are constantly trying to optimize and figure out the next little thing they could do. But yeah, I think as we were discussing during your, pro career with making hitting changes, sometimes it's just all about getting up and taking another swing
It
and
is.
staying
It
in the
is.
batter's box.
Yeah, I think sometimes we can just turn off the brain and compete, right? I think that really matters, right? We talked about that. Like, cages are where we work on something. At the plate is where you compete and you just go take an at bat. But that's way easier said than done. And so I think sometimes if we can just focus on just competing hard and letting all that stuff take care of itself, I think it helps.
Yeah. Well, I'll be looking forward to watching the Wildcats compete again this fall. And I've heard great things about football tailgating right
Yeah.
outside the Cat Dome, and
Right.
obviously the entire athletics experience at Linfield. So looking forward to seeing how y'all do this fall. And
Appreciate it. Yeah, come out and see us if you can. But yeah, we'll look forward to you following us and we're looking forward to a great year.
yeah, all right. Well, Scott,
Okay.
thank you for the time, and good luck in the golf tournament.
All right. Appreciate it. Thanks.
All right, this has been another episode of the Student Athlete Sessions. You can always listen to previous episodes on Spotify or Apple, or wherever you get your podcasts, and let us know who you want us to talk to next. D3 grads doing big things in the world. That's who we usually have on. So thanks again to Scott, and we'll see you next time.